Anthony Siner, his brother Brian Siner and other members of his group were involved in supplying drugs down to Hampshire. So the Siner OCG has been well established within Merseyside. It's got a historical footprint going back some time. There has been previous incidents that OCG has caused problems to our community here. Because of the robust policing that this group received whilst in Liverpool, they thought they'd try their hand somewhere else, such as Hampshire, down south, where they think they may not be as well known. But unfortunately for those, the law will follow them.
All of the people that you can see on this board were intercepted, arrested and charged by police as being part of this conspiracy.
County lines has been in Gosport for a period of time, in effect too long. County lines are in effect businesses. These are businesses that run drug network for profit. And what they do is they'll see, like any business, a gap in the market where there aren't organised crime groups there selling drugs and dealing with drugs, and therefore they'll see that gap and then send in their tradespeople and start to set up a business network which is selling and dealing drugs. It's that simple. It's about supply and demand. So they will see a town like Gosport and they will see that there are some vulnerabilities and some people with some addiction issues, and they will flood the area with their drugs.
County lines is a fairly new phenomenon, but essentially it's a drug dealing operation that uses a mobile phone to facilitate the supply of drugs from one area, normally an urban area such as Liverpool, to another more suburban area such as Hampshire in this case. It uses mobile phones to ensure that the drugs can move from one place to another, and that the end supply to users is always conducted through that mobile telephone.
There's notoriously been quite a big drugs problem in Gosport linked to what is known as the Scouse line. The conspiracy started, we were looking at the middle line of people who we would call like the operational managers. They would run the business on a kind of day-to-day basis. They would be looking at passing on drugs or taking delivery of large quantities of drugs, pass them out to what we call the lower level runners, who would then deal drugs on a daily basis to drug users of Gosport. There had been a previous investigation that had identified Adam Hughes. So when we sort of started looking into what we could do, we noticed that he had a warrant out for his arrest. We were obviously worried about the level of violence that was going on the sort of lower level, and obviously the fact that drugs were going out to vulnerable drug users, and we wanted to put a sort of stop to that and the violence that was happening.
Individuals involved in enforcing their drug lines are open to using significance of violence to enforce their patch and to enforce their business model. What that does is expose some vulnerable people to extreme violence.
These people deal in knives, they deal in firearms, they provide drugs to the most vulnerable in society. These people prey on those members of society.
These are not people you want operating in your towns or cities. Sometimes the individuals can also be vulnerable themselves. They could be forced into this line of work through their own vulnerability. Many people involved have been victims of violence themselves and are threatened into becoming runners, so they've been exposed to extreme violence, which is why sometimes they're so open to using it themselves. But what we don't want is that violence be perpetuated in our towns and cities.
From inquiries into Adam Hughes and other individuals linked to the Scouse line, we were able to identify Anthony Siner as being involved, who we later found out was the top level in the conspiracy that we were looking into. Through conducting inquiries into Anthony Siner, we identified that he was working very closely with his brother Brian Siner, who appeared to be the head of the Plymouth side of this conspiracy. Brian was in prison at the time. He was serving a 14-year sentence for a similar drugs conspiracy job. There was evidence that Brian was communicating with other members of the OCG whilst he was in prison. We recovered phones from Devon, and it showed that he was in contact with Brian. There was also contact between Brian and Anthony, again whilst Brian was in prison. Police believe that Anthony, he was the person that was on the ground that was facilitating the movement of drugs down from Liverpool to Hampshire and Plymouth, and that he was directing his operational managers. There's also couriers who would be bringing drugs down to Gosport. They then collect cash either on the same day or at a different time and take the cash back up to Anthony Siner. In November 2022, police stopped Gareth Roberts just outside of Plymouth. We believe that he was doing a drugs run at the time. They seized just under 3 kilos of crack cocaine and heroin. These were already sort of bagged up in 2 batches. Half was going down to Plymouth and that half was going to be coming into Hampshire, into Gosport. This was a great result for the investigation team. To take that amount of drugs off of the street is obviously great for the police as a whole to protect vulnerable drug users.
County lines, by their very nature, deal in Class A drugs. It's crack cocaine, it's heroin. They are the drugs that cause the most harm to society because the drug users, those who are addicted to those drugs, need to feed that habit. It causes serious problems for them, it causes problems to the community. And the levels at which this operation saw was up to 30 kilograms of Class A drugs being peddled from Merseyside into Hampshire. It's phenomenal levels of drugs.
Things started to get quite busy within the investigation. We started doing a lot of Section 8 warrants on the lower level individuals in the conspiracy. We were putting stops in on their vehicles and making arrests.
Like all of our county line based warrants, we get up at the crack of dawn to ensure that we are through the front doors of these people causing problems to the community before they get a chance to wake up and go about their crime committing activities that day.
Open that door, open it now!
We found SIM cards, we found cash, we found drugs, we found weapons.
When the specialist unit managed to stop the vehicle, Anthony Siner was in there as the driver and Gary Cranny was the front seat passenger. Gary Cranny had a mobile phone in his hand. This turned out to be the Scousdale line. From seizing that, we were then able to send out a message to the drug users to tell them that police had taken out that line and offer them support if they needed it. In April 2023, Brian Siner was released from prison. By July 2023, we had both Siner brothers in custody with us. When we interviewed both brothers, neither of them said anything at all. They sat there in silence. All of the hard work paid off when this got to court and all of the members of the OCG started pleading guilty to their involvement. And that's kind of when we realised, like, yes, we've done it. We have completely dismantled the Scouse line in Gosport. The work that goes into investigating and dismantling a conspiracy of this size is massive. We had an analyst that had to go through millions of lines of call data and thousands of text messages. We also couldn't have dismantled it completely without the help of other police forces like Merseyside and Devon and Cornwall.
If you're from Gosport, the majority of people here were born here, were raised here, and they're really passionate about the town. So when a county line moves in, it impacts all of the community. So the gangs that were here, they got the message. The police don't want you here. The community have told us they don't want you here. The police can only be effective with the community support. So my plea will always be, tell us what's going on in your communities so we can support you to eradicate criminality. No matter how small you think the piece of information or intelligence is, please tell us about it. Please work with us so we can help make your communities a safer place to live.